G'day guys, it's Enno here, and I'm going to try and make a video for SportsDeck NFL for the 2021 season. Going to use this as a bit of practice to possibly do some Supercoach videos next year. You might have heard me on the Supercoach Take podcast that I do with George and JD, and as you can see there, I'm on Twitter at NOBrianSC, but I just get Enno for short. So we'll see how we go. I tried recording this last night and on Screen-O-Matic, and I got the 15-minute time limit, and I was only on about slide 3. So we'll try and speed through this today, and we'll get into it now. SportsDeck NFL, what is it? It is basically the Supercoach version for NFL. So you have the trade limit, you have your set team, and you got to do trades during the season to up your team value and try and get as many primos as you can in. It's a lot harder and there's a lot more to it than Supercoach, which is fairly sort of simple. Rookies up, rookies down, and getting your primos in. It's more random, I would say. So it's not the easiest form of fantasy, but it is a bit of fun. So it's 182 million in team value. I don't know where they get that number from, and 24 players. As you can see here, I got it in the background, and a few things they take from or are similar to the other games we play for footy is the rolling lockout. The VC loophole does work, but they have auto subs, so it's no emergencies. It's just your lowest score from the bench if someone happens to miss the game. You get 2 trades a week like Supercoach, but only 26 over an 18-week season it is now because they get an extra game this year, 17, and every team has a bye. So you got to maneuver around those. And the scoring system, look, if you play normal NFL fantasy with, in a league with your mates, 10 or 12 or whatever it is a little bit different. The scoring, the touchdowns are doubled for whatever reason. So they're already hard to predict who's going to score, and the fact that they get 12 points instead of 6 makes it a lot more random as well. So that's there. And then there's obviously the buys I mentioned before as well. Then look, there's some prizes. Overall, I think gets 500, second 200, and then a small prize for the rest of the top 10. And there's a thing called Eliminator, which actually a mate of mine won last year. Luckily enough, he did pretty well. I think he finished inside the top 20 as well. But yeah, he won that, and that's a $200 prize. Basically, like from week 7, a knockout starts, and whoever's last left at the end wins that. So that's a bit of fun on the side as well. All right, we'll quickly try and run through this because I know I'm going to speak for ages on this. But first, we'll start with the quarterbacks. Learned this last year. These are the guys that make the most money. They're our cash cows pretty much, because especially this year there was five of these guys drafted in the first round. So a lot of teams looking for their next franchise player. And the top 2 for me, I've probably got as my locks. I didn't have Hurts in there until you probably have to, because last year, so he this is a second-year player, but he came in the last 5 games of last year and averaged like 40 in this format, and went from 3 mil to 13 mil in those last 5 weeks. He gets the discount because he didn't play many games, and he starts at just under 6 mil. So he's starting. He runs the ball. He's just a fantasy, perfect sort of quarterback for fantasy. His style of play. So I feel like we have to start him at that value. And then the other guy I have is Trevor Lawrence, the number 1 pick. He's going to get given the keys to the offense and run the show. So, his job's secure, obviously, and he'll have the full reign to do what he pleases. So for me, they're the 2 locks. And then in this format, you get one on the bench. You start 2, 1 on the bench. And for me, you got to make the choice between Mac Jones and Zach Wilson. 2 other guys that were drafted in the first round. Now, Wilson at the Jets, I think you're number 2 overall, is probably the way I'm leaning at this stage, just because he is that sort of running quarterback, or he has the ability to run. So in fantasy, that's what we want. Whereas Mac Jones is sort of more of your pocket passer, just going to sit, and he's quite accurate. But there's not. They did pay for a lot of weapons this offseason, the Pats, but may take a while to click. So look. Neither of these 2 are standing out completely to me, but I think at this stage I'll be going Wilson. But again, if you need the 700k there in price difference, then I have no problem in going with Mac. Then the last 2 guys are the 2 other guys of the 5 drafted in the first round, and they're not going to start week 1. Fields, I think, will be in earlier than Trey Lance because Andy Dalton is Andy Dalton. The fact that, you know, Fields is Chicago weren't really going to draft a quarterback. That they didn't go into the draft thinking that, and when he fell to them, and my Giants sort of passed on Fields, they felt they had to draft him. So I think he'll be in for Dalton pretty quickly. They don't have an easy opening schedule, the Bears, so I think Dalton will find it hard and he'll be benched pretty soon. And Lance is a hard one. I can't really get a read on when he'll come in, but it will be later on because he just did get a finger injury last week. So I think Jimmy G will probably play the first, I'd say 6 weeks. So, which is a good thing because we want these guys to downgrade to, in a couple of months. Hopefully, once the other guys have made a bit of cash, and that's where we'll get some cash gen to upgrade other positions, which will probably be our running backs, because you do have to spend up for a guy named Christian McCaffrey, who is clearly the best fantasy player in all of fantasy for NFL. He's basically a running back and wide receiver in one position, in one person. So for me, he's the lock of all the running backs. And then the other thing you can do, which depends on your team structure, but you can either go a second primo, which I've got up there, either Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, or Derrick Henry. Last year, all these guys absolutely dominated, and I missed a couple and, paid for it because once they went on a roll, especially I think, Kamara went on an absolute tear at one stage and you couldn't get him in. It kills you. So you can spend up and pay for two of these guys because you have to have CMC and have a second one, but it just depends on where you're going to take a hit, either at wide receiver or tight end. But we'll get to that later. Now, some mid-price options, I think you need at least one of these, maybe two, especially if you're not going with another primo. You'd probably have two of these guys. And for me, I think Zeke is the best of this lot. He had a down year last year, which is expected because they lost their quarterback pretty early in, I think, week 5. Dak broke his ankle and, their offensive line was all getting injuries. So, fair enough that he had a bit of a down year, but he's looking fit on Hard Knocks this year, and I think he'll be back to close to his best. Look out for him, I think. He's great value. And then the other one's probably Eckler for me. I am a Giants fan, but I just don't trust Saquon at this stage, just out of the gates. I think they're going to sort of ease him in. And off an ACL, we've only really ever seen one guy come back and sort of get back to his best, and that's AP, about a decade ago. So hopefully Saquon can do it. He's a freak of nature in his own right. So we'll see. But for me, Eckler, I think, is the second best option here. And then even Gibson can be a surprise factor if you want a bit of a pod sort of option. He's got the Ron Rivera approval as the next CMC or getting the CMC role, but I don't think anyone will ever get that role. But he'll definitely have that backfield locked up now. And then you need a few cheap options to fill up your bench. The other lock, other than CMC, is Najee Harris. He's the highest running back drafted from this year. So he's the second lock of all the running backs. I think those two are locks, and then the rest is sort of up in the air. And then you just fill up your bench with either Javonte Williams or Trey Sermon. They're two other rookies taken. I think Javonte will take a while to get into the role. So for me, it'd be Sermon as your sort of last bench spot. Then I should probably quickly talk on Gus Edwards because the Ravens, their entire running back room has just been decimated the last 2 weeks. Dobbins ACL, and then Justice Hill, another sort of guy that was a backup, has just done his Achilles, I think, 2 days ago. So they just picked up Lev Bell this morning, which I don't see him as a threat at all. That man's fallen off completely, but he's just a body in there that they need because they only have 2 right now. So Gus is great value at 5.5 mil. So he's one you can sort of have it at maybe your 4 spot and rotate him with Najee off the bench. All right, we'll get into probably the hardest position to pick just because of how many options there are, and that's a wide receiver. But there is so many guys you can have. I don't even have half the guys that, if you told me you're starting their team, I wouldn't climb you on it because any of these guys can go off in a 4 to 6 week stretch and dominate for you because it's touchdown heavy. It's so hard to predict. So I've tried to have a look at matchups. But for me, the top 3 guys, I just think you have to start with that they absolutely dominated last year. I could probably see you go without Tyreek if you had, Kelsey as your cover for the KC offense because they're so dominant. But I just still think you got to go with him. So the top 3 I'm locking in. And then for me, the fourth guy is Ridley, with Julio leaving and him becoming the number one man. I think the stats out there you can find on Twitter, but when Julio was out or when he's been out the past couple of years, Ridley averages over 100 yards and almost a touchdown a game. So he's a lot for me as well in that position. And then it's very, very hard to fill out the last two. And I think you either need to go, you have to have five primos, and then I'm go six, because having two rookie wide receivers on field, I don't feel great about, especially just because it is a very hard position to jump in and dominate straight away. I mean, I know we saw it last year with Justin Jefferson, but that's an anomaly. So I think I'm only going to pick two, rookies on the bench or rookie priced, that we'll get to later. But for me now, I think I have D-Hop. I just want a bit of that Arizona offense with Kyler, who I think will be absolutely dominant again. And then on the last one, it depends if I need the cash. I'm undecided, but it's probably either Keenan Allen, if I can spend up, or Cooper Kupp or CD Lamb as the sort of cheaper options. I like them because they're under $8 million, and I think Kupp will have sort of positive regression. He went from 10 touchdowns 2 years ago to 3 last year. They get Stafford in. I see that rising again to 8 to 10 touchdowns again this year. And CD, just the very, very highly touted prospect who I think will dominate in his second year this year with Dak back and that offense clicking. I think he's great value as well. Now, I'll quickly touch on the rookie price. I'm not going to act like I know who's going to be the best out of this lot because it's an absolute raffle. Jamar Chase, the highest drafted, Devonta Smith, the Heisman winner, Heisman Trophy winner, and Jalen Waddle, another sort of dominant wide receiver there, probably the best three rookies, as far as draft capital. And, that doesn't mean they'll be the best. Elijah Moore there, another rookie who's probably going to slot into the number 2 receiver at New York. Could be very good. And then there's Callaway, who's a second-year player, who is pretty much the wide receiver 1 for New Orleans at the moment since Mike Thomas is out for 6 weeks. So any of these guys, look, I think at the moment I've got Callaway as sort of a little bit of a punt just because he's the number 1 on his team and he's been in the system for a year, and he might start better than the rookies. So I've got him, and then take your pick with the others, maybe depending on your cash. If you need to save a bit of money, go Elijah Moore or whatever, but very, very hard to sort of predict. The tight ends, I think this is probably one of the easier parts of the field that we can pick this year. You lock in Kelsey and Pitts with no questions asked, and then it just comes down to whether you have Pitts on field as your second or you have him on the bench for another guy like Waller or Kittle. And for me, I think I'm going Kittle at the moment on field and Pitts behind him. And look, I'll show my team later, but this doesn't quite work because they both have the week 6 bye. But my plan to go into the season is Kittle for the first 5 weeks, and then trade him to Waller at his week 6 bye. And I've sort of looked at the fixtures, and I really like the opening schedule for San Fran, and then it sort of turns for the Raiders at about week 6. They sort of get a few easy matchups, so I think that'll work well, provided obviously nothing goes wrong with your team or injuries or whatever. So for me, that's sort of the easy decision for me to make this year. And then lastly, again, not going to act like these are going to be easily predictable as to what's going to happen. But kickers, last year we got pretty blessed. We had Rodrigo Blankenship, the man with the goggles, who came in as a rookie and as the cheapest price, and we kept him all year. He was dominant. But you just really can't predict these kickers. You got to, so much goes into it. Field position, how the offense is. They're so unpredictable. But these are sort of the 3 guys that are the cheap price that are going to be starting for their team. And I think for now I've got Santoso because I believe he'll be on the best offense. But again, that doesn't mean anything. You can sometimes being on the greatest offense isn't great because you only get extra points and they don't kick field goals, which obviously kickers get more for field goals. So yeah, very unpredictable, but I think I've got the Panthers guy for now. And then I've looked at, because we want to loop at either tight end 3 or kicker 3 or kicker 2 as it is. And I think it's just easy to do it with the kicker and the Green Bay kicker that this guy won't play. He's not the starting one. They play after the Panthers every one of the first 4 weeks, which is what we want to do. We want to VC Christian McCaffrey. So you'll have to be up early for some of those, 6 a.m. on a Monday to lock it in if McCaffrey goes big. But That's the best option so far for the loophole. And the defense, look, these two are the most owned right now, and I think it's probably for good reason because San Fran lost a lot of guys on defense last year to injury. Bosa, he'll be back, and a few other guys, and I think they'll be improved. And $4 million is pretty cheap for top 5 defense, I think. And the Broncos, again, they're cheaper for a reason. They're not as good, but they are promising. They have a lot of young guys. They took a corner in the top 10 this year, and I think Chubb will be back. And they look to be improved. And it's more for their matchups. I think they start with the Giants week 1, Jags, and then the Jets. So 3 pretty average teams to kick off. All right, I'll quickly just get through my team as to what I have now. I have the 700k here to go to a Wilson. Justin, some guys like this. I'll have the $0 remaining. Don't know how I've done it, but yeah, I've opted for no second primo at running back. Got Eckler and Zeke, and then Gus, as I was talking about with Najee and Sermon. And then the 4 primos that I said, that I think I'm blocking in are these guys, along with Hopkins. I've got in CD as my wide receiver 6 with Chase and Callaway on the bench. Then the tight end plan I had was Kelsey and Kittle, and do that Waller trade, I think, in week 6, which will hopefully work quite well. And then, the other guys I outlined here. But, the main thing you have with your decision making is, do you sacrifice, tight end 2 and field Pitts? Take Kittle away, get Pitts on field, and then have a guy like, probably Pat Frymouth, who's a rookie. I think he'll see some action just as a backup, but save a lot of cash there, and then you can upgrade, your Eckler or Saquon or whatever. You might be able to quite afford Dalvin Cook, but you'll be able to find that money. Say you want a second primo in Derek or whatever. Look, that could pay off because you can see if Pitts goes very well, he can sort of bridging the gap between him and a Waller or Kittle, and then Derek obviously going nuclear compared to an Eckler or something. Look, so this is a decision you're gonna have to make. It's very hard to predict, so I don't see how I could tell you to go which way or another. But I think for now, as of today, I'm going to go Eckler because I think that backfield's his now, and 2 years ago we saw him dominate. Even without having the full role with Melvin Gordon still there, he averaged over 30, as you can see here. Went pretty well for most of the season, so hopefully he can get back to that. He had a few injuries last year, so that's why he's pretty cheap. Many guys will ask, do we want to start a primo quarterback? I did last year, and I just don't think you need to. We'll be able to get one of those guys, when the buys start to come. Hopefully when these guys make a bit of money, we can get in a Lamar or a Kyler or a Patty if they don't go too crazy out the gates. But these guys, with a starting quarterback role, it's a lot easier to sort of have a bit of a floor and score decently in this. So yeah, it's too hard to pass up on all the value at quarterback with the rookies. So this is what I'm locking in. Any questions, hit me up on Twitter. I'll be probably posting my team most weeks. Whether I do a weekly video on this, we'll see. Probably depends how I go, to be honest. But hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and good luck this year. I'll post a league as well on Twitter, or a couple to fill up before we get into the season. So less than a couple of days now. Kicks off on Friday, so very keen, and good luck for the season.